Okay, so, so we're learning Orchos Tzaddikim, and we're learning about gaiva, about being arrogant. And v'amru, and Chazal say, I'm on the yoyer. Somebody who's arrogant, afilu ha'inchei beis lo miskabel. Even the members of his household have no respect for him. Shneimar says, Gava gever yahir lo yinaveh. Afilu b'naveh shelo. A person who's arrogant, he won't be at peace even in his own house. In other words, if you have somebody in your household who, even a parent who is too arrogant, it causes all sorts of friction. People lose respect for arrogant people. So therefore, in that household, there won't be peace because people see that somebody's arrogant. They feel that this person is a person who is not worthy of their respect. It's ironic because the person who's Gaiva wants more respect, but in the end, he gets less respect. And this Gaiva Mavia Adam Lidei Redifas Kavod, the star of Adam. And a person has Gaiva, a person has arrogance, and brings a person to pursue honor and to be superior to other people. As you know, I had a Rebbe in 8th grade who I hated and who hated me. And as I'm sure I've told you, one of the reasons why I didn't like him is because he demanded that we address him in the third person. This is in Eretz Yisrael, so he demanded we address him as Harav Amar, the Rebbe said, as opposed to you said. Now, he was right that that's the appropriate way to address the Rebbe, but I was annoyed that he actually demanded this of us for himself. Even though he said it wasn't for himself, he was demanding it, but in order to train us for the future, I didn't accept that. I didn't actually believe it. So therefore, I found that to be too arrogant, and that was one of the many reasons we didn't get along. So very often, I have students who I never asked them to address me in the third person because, I would feel that that's gaiva, and therefore, it's interesting that many of them come back in later years after they've got their Yisrael or something, and they learn to address the Rabbeim in third person. They started addressing me in third person, but not because I was ever makbid on that. And another aspect of that is that for me personally, I feel very uncomfortable when I make a phone call saying this is Rabbi Beckhofer. When I left a message on Akiba's phone messaging today, I said this is Yosef Beckhofer. Now, this is a personal thing. I feel it's I feel that it's arrogant of the person to call himself Rabbi so and so, even though they might have smicha and it might be legit. When somebody asks me what my name is for an aliyah, I don't say Harav Yosef Gavriel ben David. I say Yosef Gavriel ben David. And if they don't call me up Harav, okay, big deal. So now some people would say that that's not appropriate because it's covered at Torah to be called, to make sure you're called rabbi if you're a rabbi. But it's more important for a person to make sure that their midos are good midos than to make sure that the Torah receives its proper cover. If you have good midos and people respect you as a result, then cover that Torah will follow. Okay, so a lot of people, because they hold themselves, they've covered. They pursue honor. We start them to be superior to other people. And you know what happened to Korach and his group because of his arrogance. Korach was so full of himself. He wanted to become great, become the leader of Am Yisrael. He took greatness which wasn't his. As a result, he came into an argument. From the argument came out jealousy and came hatred. In other words, from gaiva, from thinking that you are great, can come to all sorts of other terrible, terrible things. These are all very bad midos. Like Orchos Tzaddikim continues to develop later in the Sefer. Now, the Orchos theme is going to discuss is going to divide into. First, we're going to talk about gaiva of a person's gashmias, and it's going to about gaiva of a person's ruchnias. It's a person in gashmias can be proud and arrogant. A person in their chachma, in their wisdom, and in their midos can be proud and arrogant. So first, he's going to talk about arrogance in a physical way, in a material way. It says, "Sof tavar kamish kashit es gufo." Anybody who adorns their body, kedelis gaos, in order to be proud, harayz the shochech es Hashem. He forgets Baruch Hu. He forgets HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lo yachusha mitzvos, and he's not concerned with mitzvos. V'lo yirlo v'achar ma'asim tovim, and is not concerned with pursuing good deeds. Ki kol kavanaso al atzmo. This person only is concerned with himself. L'kashi gufo hakoleh, to adorn his body, which is eventually going to rot. Asher achrisa rimo, which turns eventually to worms. Now, I don't know anybody like this among the people here tonight. But obviously, people who adorn themselves in very elaborate clothing, and they wear fancy clothes in order to show off. And to show off is gaiva. Now, this can extend even to people who you would think are very, very frum. You're probably not aware of this because you don't live in Muncie. But in the world of strimals, the strimals have gotten taller and taller and taller. And they have tufts of hair which stick out at the top of the strimal, even higher than the top level of the strimal. And these strimals cost thousands and thousands of dollars. I was in yeshiva recently in a koilo, Hasidic koilo, and I said, how do you reconcile these elaborate strimals, which are almost the size of spuddocks? I think they are the same size as spuddocks already, which means they're very tall, and they're wider, with the idea of being of anova, of simple living, right? And they were kind of embarrassed. And they said, well, it's not really our fault. It's the in-laws who forced this on us. And we're not so, our Rebbe is not so happy about it, whoever the Rebbe is. But I saw yesterday in one of the local papers, pictures from the Square Rebbe's grandchild's chasna, and the strimals were huge. And so this is something which you can be from, very from, and still be arrogant. The original reason why from people, Tamir Chachamim, start wearing black is out of anova. It's supposed to be a simple way of dressing, black and white. But sometimes, as we know with some yeshiva bachrim, you can make black and white very, very fancy also. So the person who does that, who dresses fancy, is a problem. Now, somebody could say, I'm dressing fancy to make a kiddush Hashem. Because if I look good, people think B'nai Torah are chashuv. And people who want to become B'nai Torah and Tamid Chachamim. That's very nice. But the question is, do you really mean it? Or do you enjoy looking good because you enjoy looking good? So I don't mean looking good in a normal way. He's going to get that later on. He's going to say, of course, people should dress nicely. But the question is when it becomes flashy. And what's the difference? What's the dividing line between dressing nicely and dressing flashy? Between dressing in a way which makes a person look good and a way which makes a person look arrogant. And that's not a simple thing. Hard to what?
What about, say, tzitzis?
I don't think tzitzis are a problem because it's a mitzvah. You may, but
No, like
theoretically, yes, a person could have show. Well, let's talk about powers.
Tzitzis, like my tzitzis.
What?
Like my tzitzis.
I don't. Listen, if you wear them because you want to show off, it's a problem, right?
I currently wear them in my pocket.
Okay, so not showing off. That's good. If you wear them to show off, that's a problem. The same thing you'll find, but Hasidim in general are less concerned with this. Like, for example, you'll find mostly by Hasidim and people with Hasidic background, the silver ataros on the talesim, right? They wear elaborate silver things, especially.
Isn't that kind of usher?
What?
Isn't the entire baguette supposed to be one, say one, fiber, however you call it?
It is. It's on top of the garment. The silver's not part of it. It's sewn on. It's sewn on top.
Okay. Well, then what about the Gaiva problem?
What?
What about Gaiva?
That's a good question. So people say it's covered Shabbos. People say it's covered at tefillah. Again, everybody has to know where they're drawing the line. It's not easy to do because people tend to fool themselves. Okay, so a person says a makashi gufo, somebody who adorns their body, karav l'zima. It's close to inappropriate relations with women. He's going to show himself off in front of women to find favor in their eyes. And as a result, you come close to them. You're going to come to frivolous behavior and lightheaded behavior. Rabbi Yerucham, the Mashgiach in Mir, said that the Mashgiach in Mir in Poland in the 1930s, he said, you should know that even Mir Yeshiva Bachrim, when they see a non-Jewish woman across the street, even a non-Jewish woman, they'll straighten their ties. Because there's a natural tendency of men that when a woman passes by, they want to look better, right? So they'll straighten their ties. And they might not even be conscious that they're doing it. But that's like what you have to be careful about, because some people eventually come to the point where their entire way of living is to show off, and to show off not just to other men, but to women. And the opposite is true about women as well, even more so. A woman who makes to dress herself fancy in front of men. With this, she ignites their heart. Puts bad thoughts into their hearts. In this way, she gets a very great punishment. She puts a stumbling block in front of many people. Chazal asked even to look at the colored garments of women which are drying on the wall, on a hanger. Nowadays, we're not so makbid on this. But back then, it was considered to be too much for a woman to hang her colored clothing out in public, even though she wasn't in it. In and of itself, that was attracted attention. So it's certainly a great punishment for a woman who adorns herself in front of men who then gaze at her, who look at her too much and too long. So in America, American society has the exact opposite of perspective, that anybody can dress as they please. It's an individual right. And that if you have a problem with it, that's your problem. You have to deal with it. It's not my problem. And in Judaism, it doesn't work that way because everybody's responsible for everybody else. It's also for a girl to dress in a way which attracts attention is considered to be problematic. It's considered to be inappropriate. It's unfortunate that in English, the word which is used to describe girls who look good is attractive, because the word attractive in and of itself means to attract attention. And any other adjective would be better. Beautiful is better, pretty is better, because it doesn't mean you're out to attract attention. But the word attractive is a very, very bad word, because the implication is that if the girl to look nice, it has to be something which attracts other people's attention. Okay. Vote, and furthermore, Hagaiva Mavili de type. If you are a proud person, you think everything's coming to me. I have a desire, anything and everything I can get, and I have no limits. It's kind of like a person with Balgaiva is full of hot air. It's like an expanding balloon. So either he pushes things out of his way, like Korach did, or he encompasses them, and they become part of his expanded self. And he wants everything is for him. He looks at everything as being for his own benefit, both other people and objects. Because somebody who's proud, arrogant, his heart is wide and desires everything. The taiva emida rosh b'chol. This is arguable, or Tzaddikim says that taiva is the worst of all midos. It's not necessarily. Some people say kina is the worst of all midos, but it doesn't matter. They're both very bad. And this person is going to desire machmas gava, so because of his gaiva, is going to want the richest clothing. To build big palaces, and to eat great delicacies. Somebody who's about gaiva always wants bigger things. Maybe won't be able to afford these things. And as a result, will come to rob and steal. Because somebody who's arrogant, his heart desires, and it's broad like a sea, to desire to get rich. He's never going to be happy with what he has. Because whatever he has is going to be too little. So according to the expenses, he's going to have to spend so much money. And the desires come from his gaiva that he's never going to have enough money. In other words, he's going to have a fancy car and a fancy house and fancy clothes and the best food. So he's always going to be not happy with what he has. He wants more and more and more. The idea, he's going to come to later on a standard by which a person should approach things. But generally speaking, we live lives of luxury today. Even poor people live lives of luxury. And an example I'm going to give you is when I was in Israel, I was staying in a moshav with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, my wife's sister and her husband. And they don't have a dining room table. They have a big plastic table and plastic chairs. And nothing wood, and they can afford it. It's not as if they can't afford a nice dining room set, but in their society, it's seen as normal to live that way, in a more simple way. In our society, it's not seen as normal to live that way without a nice dining room. Now, one could say that so we should live on the same standard they live in Eretz Yisrael, on this moshav, but that's not true. Every place has a different standard. But the point is that you should go by the standard and not try and go higher. Because if you go higher, there's no end. You should find, and he's going to say later on a big chiddush. He's going to say that a rich person is allowed to live on a higher level. But again, relatively speaking. Otherwise, it leads to tremendous difficulties. And it leads people to crime. They've caught people in Lakewood and Muncie, other places, cheating the government, right? Doing things which they shouldn't do. And the reason they do that is because they want to live a higher lifestyle and they can't afford it based on what they get. So therefore, it's a gaiva, a desire to live a higher lifestyle, which brings a person to taiva, which then brings a person to avirus. So, furthermore, a gaiva gorem shlo yeh savlon. A person who's a gaiva is not patient. They're always irritable, because since they hold so much of themselves, if somebody does something against them, they can't tolerate it. They get annoyed right out of hand. Who are you? What are you saying to me? Or who are you? Why are you not doing what I want you to do? So they always have a lack of tolerance, a lack of patience. And there's no need to elaborate on the low level of somebody who's not tolerant. Everybody knows how bad it is not to be a tolerant person. Okay, impatient people are very, very problematic. Now he gets, like I said before, there are things in the physical, with the physical existence of a person. Later on, it's going to get to spiritual existence of a person. The physical existence of a person where gaiva is good. Now, the Rambam says gaiva is always bad. Says never be to have any gaiva, but he wouldn't argue the Orchos Tzaddikim. Because when the Rambam says gaiva is always bad, it's going internal sense of gaiva. This is not internal. The person here doesn't feel proud or arrogant. The person here is doing what is necessary in order to lead a dignified, self-respecting life with self-esteem, which everybody needs to have. That's different than arrogance. Arrogance is a bloated self-image. It's unrealistic, and it's driven by a person's desire to see himself as above and beyond everybody else. This is how a person lives when a person lives a normal life, which is what the Torah wants. Shemi Omar Adam, a person might say, Gaiva mida roko kach, since Gaiva is such a terrible mida. And for everybody else, I'm going to distance myself from it, really, in an extreme. Actually, I won't drink meat. Yain won't drink wine. Won't get married. He's not going to live in a nice house. He's not going to wear nice clothes. But sack and coarse wool. And ripped and dirty clothing. And uses vessels which are dirty and disgusting. It's not going to wash his hands, his face, hands, and feet. So it looks even darker than everybody else. This is a person says, I'm doing it to go away from Gaiva. The point that then he won't be able to distance himself anymore. So he says, somebody goes in this way is called a sinner. Somebody goes too far to the extreme in rejecting Olam Hazeh and behaving in a low way. It's called a sinner. Now, Nazir is a very holy person, and to become a Nazir is a very holy thing. But there is a chisar in becoming a Nazir. It's necessary, obviously, because of the purpose of being a Nazir, but there's a shortcoming. Shortcoming is that you refrain from wine. And Hashem gave us wine to make us happy. Wine makes a person happy. So therefore, it's a Nazir, he has to bring korban chatos. It says, you have to have a kapara because he sinned in his soul. So then when he only refrained from wine, it's called a sinner. Somebody called him, or somebody refrains from everything. How much more so is he a sinner? So now for the Torah has a plenty on you, right? You have to ask him more. Because this and similar things Shlomo said, I'll teach tzaddik arbei, don't be such a big tzaddik. Don't be so smart. Why should you destroy yourself? Now, there are two things. First of all, eventually you're going to go a little bit crazy if you live this kind of life where you shun everything and try and make yourself as repulsive as possible. But besides that, it also can bring about a person the guy on the other side. In other words, a person who keeps on trying to be holier than everybody else was eventually going to be saying, look at me. I'm such a humble person. I'm so great. In other words, it becomes a source of gaiva, the fact that you are distancing yourself from gaiva. You distance yourself from one kind of arrogance, but you fall to another kind of arrogance. The arrogance of saying, I must be great because I'm doing everything I can to remove myself from gaiva. So going to the extreme in terms of preventing gaiva is almost as bad, could be worse actually, than gaiva itself. So he says a person has to choose a middle path. What's the straight path? She had not he should be clean in everything he does. Now, clean here is both means two things. It means clean, cleanliness, literally, but also means that you do things which are clean in the sense that they are fair, honest, and appropriate. They can accuse together shamasim type because nikius is the parameter, is the way which we define good deeds. Ketzad, how so? Yubash bikodim beinoni, wear average clothing. Lo mabushim aniyim hamavazim l'sham, not clothing of poor, which are poor people which embarrass their wearers. But average garments which are nice and clean. It's interesting because he says there are levels. A person that has more money is entitled to dress better, but only better based on the level of an average Rashi, not the average, not into an excess. So, also she might say kesem o shamluni sabgada. You're not allowed to go out and have a stain or a regular stain or a oil stain on your garments. The lawyer cream shouldn't be ripped. But they also shouldn't be so elaborate like the garments of people who are arrogant. Again, you have to look for a middle way. Also clean food. You shouldn't eat the super delicacies. But an average food and an average drink according to what he can afford. Which nowadays, is very, you find in from circles that people pursue, steaks which cost hundreds of dollars, and that's not Torah's way. You have to eating is supposed to be with a measure, and the key is it means that you do things which are appropriate and affordable according to your level of living, and not flashy and not showy and not ostentatious.
What about spending a lot of money on a mitzvah?
It depends. This goes back to what you asked about tzitzis. Depends why he's doing it. If he's doing it to shleim hashamayim, it's good, but he's doing it to show off to other people. If you buy an important $200 esrog to show off to other people, if you have the best esrog, you lost the mitzvah. You didn't lose. I mean, technically you got the mitzvah, but you lost you lose more than you gain. So you always have to make sure that you're doing the mitzvah, spending money on mitzvah, in order to make the mitzvah more chashuv, not in order to make yourself more chashuv. And people trick themselves all the time. People say, "Yeah, I'm doing it to make the mitzvah more chashuv," but they're really doing it. See, look at me. I'm very holy. I have a very chashuv esrog. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to uproot. I also, you should not use disgusting vessels. It's actually an issur to eat out of disgusting plates, bowls with disgusting forks and knives. That's an issur in the Torah. You're not supposed to do disgusting things. Everything should be with cleanliness. Also, it's bad. Also, his table should be clean. All his matter should be clean. Also, his body should be clean, not disgusting. Make sure to frequently wash your face, hands, and legs. And from time to time, your entire body. When Hill was taking leave of the students, they're walking together on the street. Students said to him, Rebbe, where are you going? So I'm going to do a mitzvah. What mitzvah are you going to do? I'm going to wash in the bathhouse. Is that a mitzvah to wash in the bathhouse? I'm like, hey, yeah, he said it is. Statues of kings. Which they put in theaters and circuses. There's a person in charge of them who mark them short from, who scrubs them and rinses them. And they pay him for it. He's considered to be among the great people in the kingdom. All right, whatever it means that's created in Tselem Elokim and Musa Elokim. How much more so do I have to respect my body and properly take care of it and maintain it by going and bathing, by going and washing it. Also, it says everything Hashem made is for his own glory, and I have to make sure to maintain that glory. Anybody is careful in all these matters for the purpose of a mitzvah, not to become, to adorn and to become arrogant. In other words, you're doing it for the right reasons. Even though it could look like it's gaiva because you're meticulous in how you dress, how you eat, and all these things. If you have in mind, there is a mitzvah. Now, again, a lot of us trick ourselves. A lot of us are not honest with ourselves. I can't say I'm honest with myself. But a person has to be honest with himself and know, am I doing this for the purpose of showing off? I'm doing it even showing off a mitzvah. I'm doing something because I actually want to represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu and make a Kiddush Hashem in the world. And if a person's doing it to represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, then it's a Kiddush Hashem. It's not gaiva. It's not arrogance. If a person's doing it to be Mekadesh himself, to make himself a VIP, a very important person, then that's gaiva, and then that's the problem. You know, you're teenagers. You have special sensitivity to hypocrisy and to fakers. The teenagers have the sensitivity, which I don't know if people retain as much later on. And you know that you respect people who you think are sincere and really mean what they're doing, and you don't respect people who are insincere and don't mean what they're doing, and you think they're just doing it like I thought my 8th grade Rebbe who was doing it for his own honor and cover. So as you go through high school, you have to and beyond. So be careful who you pick. I'm sure you will be careful. I'm just underlining to be your role models. Make sure the person you pick to be your role model is a person who you know is doing what they do for the sake of living a Kiddush Hashem, as opposed to doing what they do in order to think of themselves and to put themselves higher than everybody else. And again, I think teenagers are more capable of recognizing that than other people are. Okay, we have about 2 minutes left. So again, I just want to mention that next week, Yirtzeh Hashem, we will learn. We'll learn at 8:30. Next week is going to talk about the Gaivan Chochma Maisim Toiv. In other words, still now is about Gaivan Gashmis, how a person becomes about Gaivan and how they dress, how they conduct themselves, right? Next, we have to speak about how a person uses his wisdom or spirituality, right? His Chochma Maisim Toivim, how he can use them as a source of Gaiva, how he can use learning Torah to show off. And that's a big problem, okay? Because as we'll talk about next week, much of our learning yeshiva is based on showing off to the Rebbe, showing off to the Talmidim, competing. We have to make sure that we don't fall into a trap of learning for the sake or pursuing Chachma or using our Chachma for the sake of making ourselves chashuv. That's a lifelong nisayon. All right, have a good week, guys. Again, those coming from Yerushalmi, 7:00 on Wednesday. Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi, so much.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good night.